Hi everybody, my name is Viviana Mazza. I'm a journalist at Corriere della Sera, and I'm honored to be here to discuss with Brit Bennett, American writer, about her book, The Vanishing Half, that came out in Italy recently, and the Italian title is La metà scomparsa, and the editor is Bompiani, the publisher is Bompiani. The book is it opens in 1968 against the backdrop of Martin Luther King's assassination and the civil unrest that followed. And it is an exploration of race, gender, and identity. And it has made the news because, for several reasons, including the beauty of the book. Also, the fact that former President Barack Obama included it among one of his favorite books, and also HBO's interest in making it a TV series. And Brit Bennett has been giving lots of interviews, and so we're glad to have her here. Hi. So I will start by asking you to talk about, the protagonists of this book. This book is set in a fictional Louisiana town where there is a hierarchical structure that is built around the color of people's skin. So could you describe a little bit about this setup and what are the reasons why you wanted to talk about this?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I think the book really started with my mother, who is originally from Louisiana, and told me about these communities that she remembered hearing about as a child, that were Black communities that were very obsessed with skin color. So as soon as she told me that, I wrote it down because I thought it sounded like a really fascinating setup for a book, a really fascinating setting for a book. And from there, I started to think about the idea of twin sisters who come from a place like that, but decide to live their lives in two very different directions. So one of the protagonists is Desiree, who returns to this town at the very beginning of the book with a dark-skinned child, which causes a lot of uproar in the town when she returns. And then her sister, Stella, who has disappeared and has decided to live as white. So it all really started for me with the idea of that place and what it would mean to grow up in a town that is so obsessed with skin color, and how that affects your choices as you become an adult.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting also, the setting. You set the story, as we said, in a very, very important historical moment with this enormous, gigantic events that have effect on the lives of everybody. But at the same time, the people that you focus on are not the historical people. They are people who, in a way, continue their normal lives. And I know that this is a precise choice that you made because, in a way, it is interesting to you to explore what we do while history, passes by us, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it can be easy I think when we think about history, it can be easy to focus on those big moments and those important figures. But I think so much of life, as I think a lot of us have realized living through this historical moment of this pandemic, we have this huge moment that's happening around us, but at the same time, people are working. People are breaking up, people are getting married, people are having children. Life is going on in this way in our very normal, sort of intimate lives as we're experiencing these huge moments of historical crisis. So that's something that I've always found really interesting. And when I knew that I was going to set the book in the past, I knew I wanted those historical moments to be acknowledged and to have a thematic significance. But at the same time, I knew that I wanted to think about how these characters are experiencing their own moments of personal crisis while there are these moments of national crisis happening around them all the time.
Mm-hmm. And, as the people who are following us should know, this festival is centered around the idea of after. And your book happens, after this, historical event of the civil rights movement at a time, in American history. And it's coming out, it came out in the US at least, at a moment where it was also an after, in a way. It was, after Black Lives Matter, and new tragedies regarding the lives of Black people in America. So I wanted to ask you what it meant for you to have this book set in a way, after by your choice, by setting it in that time, and then having it come out at this time when people will keep probably asking you how much has it changed, and how much have people lives changed after the civil rights movement, since we are in the situation now.
Yeah, I think first of all, as a writer, I'm always interested in aftermaths. I remember that when I was taking writing classes, sometimes people would critique my writing because of that my story always started after something happened and it never really captured the thing that happened. And it's more about how people are reacting in the aftermath. But I think that that's always what I have found really fascinating, is not the event itself, but how people respond to it. So I think that's the first thing. But to the second part of that, I think you can never really know the context of a book when you publish a book, because you spend so many years writing it and you don't know the world that the book is going to be published into. So to see that this book started, as you said, in the aftermath of, an event like Dr. King's assassination, and that the book then emerges during a moment of protest over civil rights. That was something that I certainly did not anticipate. But, again, those are moments that kind of, that you can't expect or anticipate as an author. So it was all very surprising, I would say. But I think, I hope that it led to people having some interesting conversations about the book.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things you were saying at the beginning is that your mother inspired you, in the sense that she, that's where the state where she was from, she is from. And one thing that I know, because you mentioned it to me in the past, is that you often asked her, what did you do when Dr. King was, marching? What did you do after? And what was the answer that your mother gave you?
Yeah, well, I had conversations, with my mother about being alive in that time, but, she grew up in the Catholic Church. She wasn't a Baptist. So she was saying, we didn't have internet, we didn't have social media. Like, I didn't really know what was going on. So, and to me, that's something that I feel like is again, a very real way that we engage with history, where we're not always aware as it's happening that something is as momentous as it is. I asked my dad like what he thought about the moon landing, and he was just like, "Oh, I guess I thought it was kind of cool." Like he, it wasn't this moment for him of, I remember where I was when I saw it, and I think that that's something that we kind of romanticize when we think about history, versus most of the time I think people are living our everyday lives, and we're concerned with moving to a new apartment, or, starting a new job, or all of these other very, that might seem like small concerns, but to me are just sort of the details of what it means to be a human.
Yeah. And when we will remember, the period of the pandemic, probably we will remember all the small little things that we were doing, and not
Exactly.
Right, the big events.
Right.
I wanted to ask you about your characters, though. Going back to your characters. The twins who take these different directions, right, in life. They leave their small town. They will part ways, and one of them decides to pass as white. And I wanted to ask you, what is the impact, though, of Dr. King's death, I guess, but also the whole change in the society that is happening on their specific lives?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things that I found really interesting about setting this book at that time period, because most books about passing are set much earlier in history. So to set this book during a time in which there are civil rights advancements, where you start to see the rise of the Black Power movement, for Stella to grow up going to segregated schools and then to find herself, 10 years later, seeing a Black family move into a white neighborhood. That's obviously not to say that everything magically changed over that period of time, but it is, I think, it is, I would imagine, very jarring to experience that type of a whiplash between growing up in the sort of segregated South and then seeing that a Black family can move into a white neighborhood in California. So I thought that this time period, I think, was really interesting point to set the book, because there are these moments of monumental change that are happening, and at the same time, you haven't completely escaped those types of prejudice attitudes and systemic racism that she's able to sort of witness and kind of wield to her advantage in a different way. So to me, it was the tension between those two ideas, that things have changed dramatically, but at the same time, they have not changed completely.
Mm-hmm. Is there, I mean, in this tension, is there a space? What is the space for personal choice, and what is the space for destiny, or in any case, something that you cannot change, that it's gonna happen to you just because of who you are, or where you were born?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's always a really big question, because I think, particularly as an American, I think that the American mythology is deeply invested in this idea of individual choice, that the person can sort of craft their own destiny. But at the same time, we have these systems of inequality. And I think that that was something I wanted to explore with the book, to see the choices that are available to you if you grow up wealthy and white are different than the choices available to you if you grow up poor and Black. Which is not to say that you have no choice at all, but I think your choices are different, they're more limited. And I think that or that was something I wanted to explore, when it came to the twins' own children, when you see the kind of lives that are available to them. So I think as a fiction writer, I never want to believe that there is no choice, because, and that's not even political. That's just from a craft point of view, because I want to read about characters who are choosing things. I just find that more interesting. So I don't want to believe that characters are completely, completely have no ability to choose anything for themselves. I just find that less interesting. But at the same time, I didn't want to ignore the impact of, whether you're born into a rich family, whether you're born with white skin, whether if you're born male, all of these things that do affect your lives in these big and small ways.
Mm-hmm. But is it, I mean, is it destiny or is it social structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the difference between those things, I suppose, it's how you look at it. But again, I wanted to think about these larger systems and how these characters are implicated within these systems, and the ways in which they are sometimes able to push back against them, the ways in which they are not. To me, that was what felt like a real way to kind of explore identity, and also the implications of identity on people's lives.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, in terms of identity, we see Stella, the character who passes as white, who has to also pass as a different social class. She has to navigate a different system. She also has a husband, a white husband, who is quite progressive. But this being progressive puts her in an even more difficult situation in certain terms, because she's afraid of being found out. And so, I mean, it's quite interesting how what she thinks it's her choice is then constantly maneuvered by things that are outside of her.
Yeah, I think so. And, I think that with that relationship, I wanted Stella to have to kind of balance on that tightrope that you described, because she has to perform whiteness in a way that is socially acceptable. And but at the same time, she has only experienced whiteness as a Black person. So the way that she is trying to perform whiteness, at least at first, is unacceptable to her husband. It's unacceptable to her community, who consider themselves to be progressive people. And, you know, for me, there was something really fascinating about watching her navigate that, watching her try to perform this identity in a way that is always wrong. And as you said, she also has to perform a certain type of social class, which she also has never experienced. And I think that that's something that a lot of people experience as they move between social classes, of always kind of feeling like you're doing it wrong, versus the people that were born to that class. So, yeah, I mean, I think I found that tension really interesting, for Stella, trying to watch her navigate that.
And the other aspect that I found interesting in the book is how you don't stop at that, and you also get into the gender issues of what it means, you know. And since we're talking about destiny, often because of religious views, because of social views, gender is seen as almost like a destiny. Well, you know, you have a character, Reese, who, but not only Reese, you know, you have more than one character who explores what, you know, the limits, you know, between choice and the way of being accepted, and the possibility of actually, you know, changing your, you know, your gender, or, you know, being what you actually have been or you are. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. You decide to explore it in different ways through different characters. Can you talk a little bit about how this connects to the exploration of identity and race that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, I think all of those forms of identity are constructs, and they're all fluid. We're all constantly making and unmaking them. So it felt, I think, very natural to explore gender alongside race and alongside class as categories that characters are moving between and among. And I think that you're right. I think that gender is a category that people often feel very, you know, even to the point of like, you know, a baby is born and people start sort of projecting things about gender onto that newborn infant, which is really, I think, strange when you think about it. I knew that I wanted to explore that as a category, once I started thinking about this character and Reese and his relationship with Jude, and the way that relationship helps expand her own thoughts about the fluidity of identity. The idea that there's nothing really essential about any of these categories. I think that's something that a lot of the characters are kind of exploring and realizing, as they move throughout the book.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to ask you something about an essay that you wrote, the story of a black doll, W. Walker. It's not, you know, connected directly to this book, The Vanishing of, but it is connected in a way, because it's about how we teach history. And I think that after Martin Luther King, after Black Lives Matter, these subjects are coming out stronger than ever. And there are people who think that, you know, there's a lot of debate about how to teach history and how to teach the history of slavery and how to teach it to white kids and to Black kids. And I wanted to ask you to describe a little bit about, you know, this black doll's story, you know, because I think it's probably interesting to an Italian public who might not know about it, and to, you know, and I would like you to tell us the difficulty of telling that history today.
Yeah, I mean, there were these series of dolls that, I guess people my age, American girls my age, would have were really obsessed with. That were all, they came with books, and they were historical characters from different time periods, and you could like read their story and play with the doll, and it was a very big deal. And when I was growing up, the only black doll was a doll who her story was that she had been enslaved and she escaped with her family. And to this day, it's still one of the most, it's to this day, I think it's still a story about slavery that I remember more than anything. Like it impressed upon me a lot as a child, which I think makes it successful as a story, that you still remember. I was talking to someone the other day, and we both still recalled scenes from this book because they were so harrowing. And there's something really powerful about that and important. And at the same time, in this essay, I also grappled with the fact that, you know, when I was given this doll, it was a Christmas present. I thought that Santa Claus brought me this doll. Like, that's how young I was. But at the same time, I was being asked to engage with something that was really intense. And how do you kind of strike that balance? And it's something I don't think I have a good answer for. I think that essay is all just questions and not answers, because I both acknowledge the importance of teaching history and in all of its intensity to the next generation, but at the same time, not wanting to traumatize them. So I don't have a great answer for it. I think a lot of children's literature, when I look back, I mean, I remember reading books about the Holocaust that were also very intense. So I think a lot of historical children's literature, they have to kind of strike that balance in a way that's, I think, really difficult to do. And I think I kind of walked away with having more respect and appreciation for writers who do that work of trying to teach children, because there are also, on the flip side, a lot of people who don't want children to learn anything about any bad thing that white people have ever done in America. Like, there are people who do not want that to be taught in textbooks. There are people who want to ban books that teach about slavery. So I feel like it's really important for writers to do that work of educating. But at the same time, I think it's really hard to strike that balance of how to teach in a way that doesn't traumatize kids. But at the same time, like I said, I still remember those books. So as you can see, I have a lot of complicated feelings about it. But to me, that's what makes it really fun to write an essay about something, is try to kind of untangle all of those feelings.
Mm-hmm. And I have one last question that it has to do with what is happening right now. I mean, your book comes out at a time when you have the U.S. President Joe Biden, who finally recognized the Tulsa massacre. And I mean, there is a moment in which people are saying, some people, there were Black Lives Matter protests, and more white people were expressing solidarity with the movement. And yet this, after so many years and after the repetition of violence and police brutality, to some people this looks very little, So I would like to ask you, how do you see this historical moment? And we have just seen the U.S. Census show that it's a society that is so diversified. And I know that people say demographics is not destiny, and it doesn't mean that, and also sometimes discrimination happens in certain places and certain parts of the country more than other, perhaps. I guess my question is, could you help us, give us an idea of what, after all this time, is happening to the civil rights in the U.S.?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I could. I don't know. I think that it's too soon to really tell. I mean, I said this to people last year when the book came out in the U.S. and everybody wanted to know, like, is this the moment we've been waiting for? And I don't know. I think you can't really know when you're inside a moment whether something has significantly changed. And I think often the moments that we look to as being the moment when everything shifted, it's often not that moment. It's something else that happens behind the scenes, or it's a law that gets signed, or it's something that happens that no one is looking at. And that's what kind of leads to something new. So I think it's too early to tell, but I think the, history of race in America has always been complicated, and it's always been like the pendulum swinging back and forth from one side to the other. And I have no reason to believe that will stop. I don't believe that the pendulum is going to swing towards this sort of justice, and it's not going to back, it's not going to swing back the other way when there's a backlash to that, because that's always been true in American politics and in American culture. That every time there's some type of gesture towards equality, there's a backlash to that. So I have no reason to believe that pattern will stop. I have no reason to believe that we have kind of entered some new reality or some different reality. I have no reason to believe that Donald Trump could not win the next election. Like, I have no reason to believe any of that to be true. So I think mostly it's too early for me to feel comfortable saying what anything means. But I will find out like the rest of you, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Brit Bennett, for being with us for Book City. And I want to remind everybody about the title of the book, The Vanishing Half, which is La metà scomparsa in Italian, published by Bonpiano. Thank you so much for being with us.